The hope is that if social media remove the ability for nuance in conversation, these chatbots and their more powerful future replacements will become integrated across all of our communication platforms, search browsers, and digital work tools. A renaissance of sorts of nuance and deeper understanding may actually be down the line for humanity.
We're going through something absolutely historic.
Technologies across the board are growing exponentially.
It's a disruption that's going to completely redefine the way businesses compete.
In the next decade, we're going to lose 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies.
The exponential growth of computing is continuing.
AI is nowhere near its full potential.
Whether you like it or not, that the future cannot be stopped by anyone.
So welcome back to the Future Tech and Foresight podcast. I've really been looking forward to doing another episode on AI, especially with all the exciting new releases coming out of OpenAI and the other large organizations creating what many have been calling a new AI arms race. By now, you've hopefully all tried out ChatGPT to help with either writing reports, essays, deriving media content, or desk research, etc. And maybe a number of you have tried the various image generators online, like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, to help create strange and unique and sometimes beautiful images for blogs, websites, or just for fun. So what I want to try and do today is kind of give a bird's eye view of how this AI arms race came about, what's happening in the race today, who the main players are, and what the technologies can be applied to. And of course, give some thoughts on where we might be headed with this undeniably powerful and exciting technology. And yes, if you're asking, much of this will actually have been written or at least influenced by ChatGPT. How could I not do so? So before diving into how GPT has really blown the floodgates open and what the current state of generative AI is, let's briefly look at how we got here. Generative AI has evolved significantly over the past several decades, from simple rule-based systems to complex deep learning models. For a deeper breakdown of this, I'll have an extended blog post on this ready in the next week or so, but we'll just kind of look at kind of the overview of this evolution in this podcast. And remember, generative AI is not to be confused with deep learning or the past excitement coming out of systems like DeepMind's AlphaFold. Deep learning techniques are often employed in generative AI models to achieve their goals of creating new, realistic data. While deep learning is a broader field encompassing various tasks and applications, generative AI is a specific area within AI that leverages deep learning techniques to generate novel content. And that's where the idea of generative comes from. So early AI research in the 1950s and 60s really laid the foundation for the field, focusing on very basic problem solving and reasoning issues. In the late 1950s, neural networks emerged with the invention of the perceptron, which later evolved into deep learning with multi-layer networks. Simple programs like ELIZA, back in 1964, simulated natural language conversation with a limited set of rules, allowing for basic chatbot-like interactions. Rule-based systems in the 1970s and 1980s used pre-programmed rules for text generation. Systems like Ractor in 1983 used predefined rules to generate text or stories, while expert systems applied rules for tasks like medical diagnosis and decision-making. These highlighted the challenges of creating more flexible AI. Then we move into neural networks. So multi-layer networks, or deep learning, have been applied to various tasks, including image classification, object detection, and speech recognition. Hidden Markov models in the late 1980s and 1990s helped model sequences of data, improving natural language processing and speech recognition. For an example, this is IBM's VIA Voice, which was part of speech tagging and bioinformatics for gene prediction. Later on, we got recurrent neural networks in the 1990s that allowed AI to handle time-dependent data much better, making them suitable for tasks like language modeling and machine translation. The example of Google's neural machine translation allowed for sentiment analysis, and music generation was able to be done by Google's Magenta. Later on, generative adversarial networks, or GANs, in 2014 really revolutionized generative AI. This enabled the creation of more realistic images with NVIDIA's Style GAN. And then variational autoencoders offered another generative approach, learning probabilistic mappings between data and latent space for tasks like image synthesis. This is an example of generating new images of faces, and text generation, like creating natural language sentences. And finally, transformers in 2017 took over with self-attention mechanisms, leading to state-of-the-art language models like BERT, which can do sentiment analysis, the GPT series with text generation, and T5 from Google with content summarization. These applications showcase the versatility and potential of generative AI techniques across various domains, from text and image generation to natural language understanding and decision making. But what's so exciting about today's generative AIs? So as I mentioned at the beginning, with ChatGPT blowing open the floodgates of generative AI and becoming the fastest growing platform of all time with over 1 million users signing up for its first 5 days, organizations who were already researching or developing AI have been launching their own versions to the public over the last few months. So let's take a look at what these releases entail and what each of these AI systems actually do to get a much better sense of what this actual AI race is all about. So ChatGPT has been really seen as the lightning rod moment that gathered international attention to generative AI, and an infusion of investments, applications, and content entered into the space really quickly. However, it can actually be argued that this arms race was already quietly happening, and OpenAI simply released ChatGPT before many of its competitors released their own AI systems, even though there was some internal skepticism about the chatbot's success. So months earlier, an AI chatbot that Meta had released called BlenderBot had actually flopped, and another Meta AI project, Galactica, was pulled down after just 3 days. And even before that, a few years previously, Microsoft's AI Twitter bot, Tay, needed less than 24 hours to be corrupted by Twitter users and started responding with all forms of actual racist and misogynistic views, and was promptly removed from the platform. But with ChatGPT's simple interface, impressive responses, and OpenAI's quick ability to limit and enforce rules that stopped it from going down the path of previous systems, the gates were opened. So after ChatGPT, Microsoft's Bing was one of the first alternatives. With Microsoft's $10 billion investment in OpenAI, Microsoft Bing's search engine and Edge browser incorporated GPT-4, the improved version of OpenAI's language model that formed the base of ChatGPT. So with this integration and Bing's connection to the internet, a really important point here is that current up-to-date information can be received from Bing Chat, which is a clear improvement over ChatGPT, which had a September 2021 cutoff to real-world information. You still need to get onto a waitlist to access Bing Chat's full power, but this not only started to make Bing a rival to Google Search, but also prompted the internet giant to release its own chatbot alternative. So Google's Bard, being powered by Google's own Lambda system and not OpenAI's GPT series, was perhaps the most anticipated rival, but arrived with the most disappointment. So during the first demo, Bard answered a question incorrectly regarding the James Webb Space Telescope, which actually sent Google's share down 9%, losing investors a total of about $100 billion. I think that this was actually estimated to go up to about $170 billion by the end of it. So after a round of close testing by experts, Google's Bard is now available to the public for those who have joined a waitlist. What is exciting about Bard is that Google plans to actually have it integrated across the entire Google product suite, which I think really fits into the future reality of these AI systems, but more on that in a bit. So a number of other AI chatbots are being integrated into search engines just like Bing and Google's. Baidu, which is China's biggest search engine, recently released Ernie. Though some say its accuracy is actually greater than ChatGPT, especially in its native Chinese, it seems to avoid responses that are political in nature, and there are concerns about its training data due to China's internet controls and limitations. And then there's Opera and Brave browsers, who both recently released integrated chatbots as well. And there are numerous other alternatives to ChatGPT like DeepMind's Sparrow, Anthropic's Cloud, and Jasper Chat. Meta released an open source and smaller version named Llama, so researchers with less computing power can access and use it. And pay attention to this because there will be kind of a large point that I'll be bringing at the end near the conclusion of this episode that really touches on why Meta's open source release might actually be very important for the future of this entire space. Other organizations like Alibaba, Tencent, Amazon, Apple, and even the UK government have also motioned to be joining this new AI arms race by creating their own chatbot. Interestingly, Elon Musk originally invested about $100 million in OpenAI for the goal of creating open and free AI systems, but has recently been very vocal and has criticized OpenAI for shifting towards a profit-based model. According to the news website The Information, Musk has also approached researchers in recent weeks about forming a new research lab that would rival AI. So it'll be very interesting to focus on that over the next couple of weeks and see if there's any kind of developments there. But there has actually been another battle that's been waged alongside the text generation fight, and it's that of AI image generation. So similar to the chatbot battle, several competitors have already produced systems that allow users to simply write a description of what they want the AI to create, and within a few seconds, various pictures pop up approximating the image. These images range from very highly detailed and accurate to the originally written text, to far out and even grotesque renditions, but there does seem to be severe continual improvement over the last year or so for many of these AI systems. So you may have heard about this specific example in the news in the past year, is the app that I would say really kicked this image generation AI into the public's consciousness, and it was called Midjourney. And the event was a piece of AI-created art actually winning first place in an art competition back in September of 2022. So though this event sparked debate and controversy, I think it really shed significantly light on the generative AI space and brought attention to many of the other AI platforms already available. So for example, OpenAI yet again had produced DALL-E and DALL-E 2, and they were actually some of the first used to create images for users with improved clarity and resolution. Recently, Shutterstock, which many people have actually said was ripe for obsolescence due to the growing use of image generation and the lowering need for stock images, has actually now incorporated OpenAI's DALL-E 2 to allow people to create their own images, but for a price, of course. So I personally use Night Cafe and Starry AI, which can render your prompted images with different artistic styles built directly into the generation with a very simple click of a button. And perhaps the system most geared to open source and availability is Stability AI's Stable Diffusion, which was released in August of 2022. So even though it has a more open source nature to it, Stability AI was already caught in one of the first class action lawsuits brought forth by a number of artists who claim that the art generators scrape their work without consent for use in the training datasets. So it'll be interesting to see how this lawsuit eventually shapes up and what kind of impact it'll have on the entire AI image generation industry. And finally, only in the last 2 weeks, Midjourney version 5 was released. So this is an important release as it can produce images with photorealistic quality. I'll have a few pictures in the show notes for you to see, but essentially these pictures, which are completely generated by AI, are pretty much imperceptible from photos taken by professional photographers, and finally generate hands correctly. This was always one of the kind of immediate uncanny valley tells that an AI had actually made the images. And if AI can generate images, it can also generate video. So one of the early interviews that I actually did on generative AI was with the CEO of Synthesia, Victor Riparbelli. So his company employed deepfake or synthetic media technology to make it look like people were able to speak different languages, like their viral video of David Beckham looking like he spoke 9 different languages. During the interview, Victor warned that in the next few years we will be able to generate video that will be indistinguishable from using real actors. Though he may have been a little bit off with his prediction timeline, we are now seeing the first products come out that allow video to be generated from text alone. As an example, last week, Runway released its Generation 2 AI video model, which allows for an initial 3-second clip to be made entirely from text, with plans to extend the duration. Soon to be available for public use, the videos won't look realistic to start with, but as we've seen with text-to-image tools, video creation most probably won't take long to become realistic. So to kind of summarize these ideas, generative AI so far has given us text, image, and the early phases of video generation from basic text prompts. As opposed to a standalone platform like ChatGPT, we are starting to see text generation being integrated into browsers in the form of chatbots, and image generation being added to legacy online platforms like Shutterstock in order to remain relevant. But this begs the question, what is coming next? So not even 2 weeks ago, OpenAI yet again shattered the internet with the release of its new GPT model version, the multimodal GPT-4, making it instantly available for anyone using the premium version. ChatGPT is 10 times more powerful than the latest GPT 3.5 predecessor, or 100 times more powerful, estimated anyways, than the original GPT-3 version. This makes it more accurate, better at understanding nuance and context, and providing overall better responses. It has already passed numerous high school and college level exams, including the bar exam being in the top 90% for many of these exams. The discipline areas include law, history, psychology, statistics, environmental science, physics, economics, and many more. I'll have a list of all of them up on the show notes for anybody that's interested. It can accurately assess images through a kind of roundabout connection to Discord, and has already been implemented in a few pilot programs with well-known organizations like the Khan Academy, Morgan Stanley, and even the government of Iceland. But I really think that the exciting part of GPT-4 lies beyond the more or less basic chatbot interface, which was actually used to generate a lot of the text in this episode. So what are some of these other exciting aspects that GPT-4 can bring to us? So with the OpenAI App Store, which was very recently released, plugins can access specific databases and translate them into natural language. Most notably, it has connected to Zapier's automation software suite, essentially enabling a phrase of text to turn into a set of actions that the AI will carry out. Example, it can write an email, then send it for you, or find contacts in a CRM, then update them directly, or add rows to a spreadsheet, then send them as a Slack message. The possibilities seem to be endless, as stated in the original Zapier press release. So another element here of GPT-4 is real-time insights into company data. So as GPT-4 can take substantially more text as input compared to GPT-3, I believe it's something like 25,000 words can actually be used as input into a new text prompt, businesses can ask GPT-4 to analyze internal information like financial data and assess actions, give recommendations even, and possibly shift performance or actions so that that organization is much more competitive in the long run. So I think we're starting to see the explosion or the growth, or I guess you could even say the birth of AI analysts that are able to analyze businesses, give recommendations, and make these businesses more efficient in a faster timeline, and maybe even offer more interesting, imaginative ideas than their human counterparts. So one of the other things with ChatGPT-4 is that it is now, or it can be at least, linked to the current internet, allowing it to search and scrape up-to-date information, analyze and summarize what you want to search for. This can essentially replace a lot of desk research, and this is why the AI arms race is so competitive. If people become more accustomed to using, say, ChatGPT, and it performs better than a Google search, Google's main search function will become severely disrupted, if not completely obsolete, over the course of a couple months. There are several more examples, several more elements of GPT-4, such as I described before, assessing and describing images. It's been shown to analyze Ethereum contracts and find vulnerabilities. It can write code for programs and much, much more. GPT-4, remember, was released less than a month ago. And in its roughly first 2 weeks, hundreds of new applications for it were created. Significantly more are on the way as developers and users explore how it can be integrated into new tasks, new forms of work, and even writing larger sections of articles like this one. And while this is happening, GPT-5 is expected to be released around 2025, perhaps even earlier, which will cause another wave of disruptions, opportunity, and of course a flurry of excitement as people try to figure out what new things it can be applied to. Okay, so with that in mind, let's try and take all of this understanding and pose the question, what does the future of generative AI and this current AI arms race hold for the future of society? So as I'm still on the wait list to actually access GPT-4, I was not able to plug GPT-4 into the internet and get kind of a breakdown or a list of how the AI arms race is going to be impacting the future of society. So I had to do this research the old-fashioned way. But over the last couple of weeks, I've been obviously paying attention on Twitter, LinkedIn, and other social media platforms, talking to people that are kind of invested into the space, and trying to get maybe some of the more interesting, unique, and maybe even scary ideas of the impact that generative AI will bring about. So here are a couple of the perhaps more interesting aspects that generative AI can bring about. Firstly, discussions of job loss have been reignited. Now, I've covered this topic extensively in the first 100 episodes of the podcast, but this new wave of generative AI does accelerate some of the ideas my guests and I have previously discussed. Currently, there's a large focus on the shifting nature of tasks within organizations that are using just even the base ChatGPT model. But the ability to automate a significant amount of tasks with the GPT-4 API is being explored as we speak and will be a continuous source of focus for this topic. I'm sure I will be talking about this in many future episodes with a number of guests. But funnily enough, ChatGPT was actually asked which jobs it thinks it might replace. And it responded with a more or less, I guess you could say, logical list of jobs. Data entry and data processing, customer service and support roles like answering frequently asked questions, translation tasks, and report writing and content generation are all most probably some of the first jobs, or at least tasks, to be taken up by ChatGPT. I'm sure that this list will grow in time, and I will be covering that on the podcast each time that I talk about this topic. Next, we have many questions regarding the safety, the ethics, and even the bias of generative AI. These have always been at the center of concern for the future of AI systems, but we have already seen some users have their conversation titles leaked to other users due to a glitch. Some users have had their credit card details and personal account information revealed due to another bug, and a number of tests have exposed political bias for one candidate over another. So though OpenAI has addressed and is dealing with these concerns, these are typical issues that have been identified in other AI systems in the past, and it is much more likely that they will actually persist into the future. But the question still remains, how will this disrupt society in the long run? Many fear that AI might not just perpetuate the polarization of our cultures that we've been seeing for the last decade or so, but actually widen the gap between people's perspectives at an accelerated rate. For this reason, many are calling for regulation of the space or of the industry to be ramped up. Then there are possible developments that weren't really expected to materialize for years that are already happening. So one of the large constraints of the generative AI space is the actual cost to train and maintain these AI systems due to the vast amount of data they need to train on to become as powerful as they are. But enter Alpaca, an open source ChatGPT made for less than $600. Stanford researchers were able to use Meta's Open Llama model to create a chatbot that has similar ChatGPT functions for a fraction of the cost. In fact, ARK Investing Management predicted a 99% reduction in AI costs would take until 2023 to be realized, and this is just for ChatGPT-like performance. So Alpaca seems to have done it within 5 weeks of this prediction being published. Now, this is still being peer-reviewed, but if it is true, there might be another massive wave of disruption coming before this first wave has even settled. And most notably, if we can already create our own AI models nearly off of our smartphones, where's the incentive for large players like Amazon or Google to pour billions of dollars into the space? It might actually kill the arms race before it really takes off. So then there are deeper and perhaps more existential problems that these AI systems bring about. So Peter Nixie, a founder and programmer, recently wrote that Stack Overflow, which is kind of the main repository for programming questions and answers, where 100 million users ask questions to other developers, receive answers, and saves several years worth of time as the answers can be seen by millions who have the same question, might become obsolete due to GPT-4. So as Peter writes, what happens when we stop pooling our knowledge with each other and instead pour it straight into the machine? Where will our libraries be? How can we avoid total dependency on the machine? And as programmers will now be asking GPT-4 questions in private, the next versions will have less and less data to train on. This raises a more profound question. If this pattern replicates elsewhere and the direction of our collective knowledge alters from outward to humanity to inward into the machine, then we are dependent on it in a way that supersedes all of our prior machine dependencies. Whether or not it, quote unquote, wants to take over, the change in the nature of where information goes will mean that it takes over by default. Like a fast-growing COVID variant, AI will become the dominant source of knowledge simply by virtue of growth. If we take the example of Stack Overflow, that pool of human knowledge that used to belong to us may be reduced down to a mere waiting inside the transformer. Or perhaps, even more alarmingly, if we trust that the current GPT doesn't learn from its inputs, it may be lost altogether. Because if it doesn't remember what we talk about and we don't share it, then where does the knowledge even go? Peter doesn't have an answer to this. Some people responded by alluding to the printing press or books and how people were scared of losing valuable human traits with those technologies as being similar to the fears around ChatGPT. But perhaps this time it actually is different. We don't know. We'll have to see what happens. And as Peter alluded to, the same could be true for the capacity of large language models and similar AI tools to actually shape the creation of cultural products, fiction, art, music, etc. In this context, much depends on our appetites for consuming AI-generated content once its novelty wears off. Do we want to read novels or social media posts with no human author? Will we be happy with procedurally generated playlists, or will we prefer the human touch, no matter how imperfect or slow, to the spotlessness of AI? Will cheap, instantaneously and good enough content make up 99% of our needs, with the artisanal, time-consuming and expensive products of human labor filling the remaining 1%? Will human-made be to cultural products what handmade is to physical products? I don't know. This idea is reinforced with Yuval Noah Harari's recent New York Times op-ed on his concerns about AI eating culture. Essentially, AI, he writes, could rapidly eat the whole of human culture, everything we have produced over thousands of years, digest it, and begin to gush out a flood of new cultural artifacts. And these chatbots are our second contact with AI. The first being that AI that curated the social media posts that we have been seeing for over a decade. With our first contact, a massive wave of political and cultural polarization has been realized, not to mention the severe psychological problems as discussed in detail by modern thinkers like Jonathan Haidt. Harari and his co-authors write that we cannot afford to lose again. AI is dangerous because it now has a mastery of language, which means it can essentially hack and manipulate the operating system of civilization, and therefore governments, regulators, and developers as well must take the necessary steps to respond properly. But there is hope. In OpenAI's most recent long-form podcast appearance with Lex Fridman, Sam Altman, the CEO, discussed how hopeful he was for the future when Lex began describing some of the responses that ChatGPT had given him. The responses, though elaborate and accurate, were also nuanced, and this is important. This is giving both sides of the argument, and often simply laying out the pros and cons of each side's thinking, and not necessarily giving an opinion on an argument. The hope is that if social media remove the ability for nuance and conversation, these chatbots and their more powerful future replacements will become integrated across all of our communication platforms, search browsers, and digital work tools. A renaissance of sorts of nuance and deeper understanding may actually be down the line for humanity. This may breach the cultural gap, slow down, and perhaps end the polarization we have been seeing for the last several years as well. Then again, the same hopes were stated with the emergence of the internet. So, as a final thought, this is what ChatGPT has to say as kind of a conclusion to the ideas presented in this podcast. As generative AI models like ChatGPT continue to advance, we find ourselves entering a brave new world of human-AI interaction. These cutting-edge models are transforming the way we communicate, collaborate, and create, offering unprecedented capabilities in generating human-like text and images. As we harness the power of generative AI, we must navigate the challenges and opportunities it presents, striking a balance between the immense potential benefits and the ethical considerations of AI-driven technologies. This exciting era holds the promise of reshaping industries, revolutionizing human-computer collaboration, and unlocking new possibilities for creativity, problem-solving, and knowledge discovery.
A lot of future-shocked people and future-shocked institutions in our society are simply overwhelmed.
Once there is superintelligence, the fate of humanity may depend on what the superintelligence does.
Science fact is catching up to science fiction.
The first truly intelligent machine will be the last invention that humanity needs to make.
The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
Within a 10-year design revolution, we can have all humanity living the highest standard of living anybody's ever known.
Progress is accelerating at an exponential pace, and it's going to reach a point where progress is so fast it's going to be a singularity.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens.
Every single headline points to the birth pangs of a Type 1 civilization.